and welcome. Catching up on some of your comments and questions still from last week. So if you've not had a reply, you will. I always respond in some form or another, and all questions are aired here. So please subscribe and keep watching, and your question, your comments will come up. The first, I am a Buddhist from Bangladesh. I am 25 years old and only child of my parents. I want to be a monk for the rest of my life. But my father and mother isn't giving me the permission. Please guide me how I can convince them. You can't convince anyone else to change their view, to become a Buddhist, other than by your own activities and the example you set. We don't preach, we're not evangelical. It isn't the idea that Buddhism is there to convert. It isn't to be sold. It isn't to attract people. It is simply the answer to the cause of suffering, the removal of that cause, and the end of suffering within this lifetime. This is what the Buddha taught. Now, by establishing these teachings within his Sangha, where people joined him, becoming monks and later becoming nuns, there was a body we now call the Sangha, representative of those teachings, living in the way he taught, that by their very nature, the way they lived, and in a simple way, going each day on Pindapata, collecting food, gave an example to others, much like the Buddha himself saw, not of Buddhism, being that he was the Buddha, but before his enlightenment he saw a monk of another religion, a samana, peacefully wandering through the countryside, seemingly without a care in the world. And this was one of the fourth of the four heavenly messengers. After seeing someone aging, seeing someone sick, and seeing a dead man, he saw a samana, a monk. And it was those four, and that convinced him that there was another way to the materialistic and hedonistic life. But the Buddha didn't insist that all have to become monks or nuns, only if it's possible. So for that reason, there is a requirement that you have permission from your parents. Now, as you say, you don't have the permission, they're not willing to give you permission. But I wouldn't suggest you go about trying to change their minds or convince them, but simply to live Buddhism, live by the Noble Eightfold Path. You don't even need to discuss it with them. You can refrain from taking part in any other religious activities that may be contrary to the teachings within the Noble Eightfold Path, but it doesn't mean that precludes you from joining in everything. You can join them in festivals and suppers where appropriate, but for instance, someone of a Christian faith taking wine at communion, you wouldn't be able to partake in that, but that's also quite acceptable within Christianity these days. And I can't really make reference to anything because I don't know what religion your family are other than Buddhist. So you can, without contravening or having conflict with your own practice, still join in with family activities on the sidelines. Now, by acting in this very passive way, you will not cause any offence or give them any reason or cause to dislike the idea of Buddhism. Maybe it's something they see as an opportunity or an option that's giving you an excuse to get away from them. It's taking you away from the family fold. I mean, you're 25, and in the West, you've usually long left by then. But I know in perhaps Bangladesh and in India and in some countries like here, it's common for people to stay around the family home for much longer. However, even at the age in my 40s or 40, I had to seek permission from my mother and father, whom had no idea what I was really asking permission for, other than what they saw as monks in Christian faiths. And possibly they thought, well, you know, we're giving permission because it won't last long. It's just a fad, a phase he's going through, and, you know, what does it matter? As far as they were concerned, I would have gone and done it anyway. But I still had to seek their permission because it is a requirement. If you're not able to have that permission, then you carry on practicing as a lay person, and you just have as much opportunity in that environment and situation to practice as long as you're diligent with it and you follow the Noble Eightfold Path. Eventually, they may see the changes in you and see your dedication and convince themselves that it's not a bad idea, and you may be able to get their permission later on. Another thing you can do is you can ask them if it would be all right for you to go and take temporary ordination. So go on one of these Pabaja retreats where you take the first part of the ordination process and you are a monk for a set period of days, say 10 days, 14 days, maybe even a month, something like that. They may give you permission to that if you put it to them in this way, to say that if you are able to just do that, you'll get it out of your system, and maybe that'll put you off, and then you'll have because that is the truth. It could well be, and this is the purpose of that form of temporary ordination, to see how you get on living as a monk. Because although you say you would like to be a monk for the rest of your life, if you haven't done it, how do you know that? You're renouncing everything, and you're living a life that is comparatively difficult to living a life in lay life, as a lay person. And as a Buddhist practitioner, you are able to do what you like. You can meditate anytime you like. You can study if you wish. You can also work. You can also do other things that lay people can outside of the 5 precepts that many monks or lay people living in a monastery can't, even on 8 precepts, like listen to music or watch entertainment, watch even, documentaries about Buddhism and things on YouTube. You can't really be doing that as a monk. It's not considered appropriate. It's a form of entertainment. So think of it in that sense. If you've not tried it, ask if you can just go and try it out and explain. It is literally just a 10-week retreat. If not, and you can go and do that anyway, that you don't need permission for because it's Samanera ordination, and I don't think that question comes up because it's temporary ordination. But it would be a good way of planting the seed. So that's all I can say. You can't convert people. It's never a good idea. That just turns them against the idea. Just act and practice the Sila, Samadhi, Panya of the Noble Eightfold Path. And this will, by way of example, naturally lead them to the conclusion that Buddhism is not going to do you, their son, any harm. If you have duties and responsibilities for their care, as their only child, that's a whole nother issue. This is something you have been born into, but consider that as part of your practice. This is dana, this is generosity. It's one of the highest blessings, caring for our parents throughout their lives, not only in old age, but that is a responsibility that's perhaps held on to more securely, more firmly in some countries than others these days. But where you are, I'm sure it's very important, and you're not alone in that sense with having that responsibility. So, this question, do you know... no, I shall perhaps leave that question because it's a little bit off the track. I'll come back to it, though, when I have a chance to highlight the the relevant elements. Do you know whether it is permitted, recommended, or cautioned against writing down something like a diary, or writing about your inner and outer experience that have to do with your Buddhist practice? For example, if a monk thought it may be valuable to others to write down about their monastic life, the difficulties, or whatever it is, could they be spending time on an activity like that? One of the reasons I'm asking is because I heard from other monks whose videos are YouTube that, for example, there is some rules or cautions against playing music whilst creating visual art is considered a good activity. So I wonder whether there is any rules about activities such as writing. Okay, we can write. Many monks, we wouldn't be here today if monks hadn't written down. There weren't books written about monks, or they'd written their own biographies. So we have biographies of monks, autobiographies, so biographies written by other people. We have recorded writings written down by others and by the monks themselves of their teachings, Dharma talks. This is fine. The only rules there are is we are, as you rightly say at the end, not allowed entertainment. If one finds creating a diversion and a form of entertainment, then personally I would suggest that's to be avoided. There are, however, other schools of thoughts in this, if they think it's useful to the practice. As far as I'm concerned, what is necessary for the practice has already been laid down in writing by the Buddha in the suttas, and we don't need any other graphic representation of that other than the spoken word, which comes naturally through Dharma talks, which are unplanned, unrehearsed, usually, and by way of the commentaries, perhaps even to that extent. That's stretching it. Really, the commentaries that are written concerning the original teachings of the Buddha contained there in the suttas, a lot of parts of which are also commentaries, so written by other monks about the word of the Buddha's teachings. Monks are not allowed to speak of their own personal attainments in the practice. That is a specific rule, other than to their teacher or another monk, someone of their Sangha, one of their brothers in other monks. So that cannot be written down or recorded. I'm not sure quite what you mean at the end with the YouTube videos. What I'm doing here, talking with you, is to some extent sharing my experience, because I've been doing this now for a couple of years, and in that time I've been travelled a little bit, moved from here to there, and been developing my practice. But really I'm discussing your comments and questions in relation to your own practice, and trying to share with you from my own experience answers that will be helpful to specific questions and comments and people in general who are interested in Buddhism. So it isn't so much a diary or a vlog, as you might have heard the term, and I would suggest that something like that is perhaps, apart from the odd one-off, you might see the day in the life of a monk here and there, but they're generally quite short videos to just give you an idea of what a monk's routine is in a monastery, living in a monastery. So that's sufficient. There's not much one could record in the day-to-day activities of a monk other than that's already available. So as far as creating art and things and what have you, of course, there is it's not a caution against playing music. You cannot. It's against the seventh precept. Entertainment covers watching movies or playing music. We're not allowed to do that. But lay people can do what they like. You're not a monk, so it's not really something you need to be concerned with. Journaling itself, what you're describing at the beginning of that, was writing down all of your innermost thoughts and things. I mean, I suppose anyone can do that, but not with a view to sharing them. This is a practice outside of Buddhism and not something I've done myself or would recommend. I think it's better to allow these thoughts and considerations about what's going on in your day to come and go. I think dwelling on the past too much by writing it all down and then reading it back later and then even reviewing it at a later stage is unnecessary. We're looking to eradicate the defilements of greed, hatred and delusion, and we start in the present moment, leaving the past behind us and not imagining and having expectations of the future. This is the practice of Buddhism. Journaling comes from really something completely different. But you know, entertainment videos, some videos can be very glossy, very entertaining, and I'm sure they're out there. I'd steer away from them. And monks shouldn't be doing such things, I shouldn't think. How to detach ourselves from physical sensation and mental sensation. Well, do you want to do that? We need to see, hear, smell, taste and touch in order to survive. So, and think. So these are the 6 sense doors. Seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching and thinking. These are a necessity of life. Maybe we could do without seeing, or seeing very well, or hearing very well, or lose our sense of smell. But all of these things, to detach ourselves, how to detach ourselves from these, why would you want to? Now, when you attain to jhanas and you practice meditation, samadhi, you will find that you will lose the distraction of those senses, those sense doors, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and eventually be able to calm the thinking process down so that seemingly there is no thinking, no thoughts either. This will happen naturally through the practice. We don't just do it, and you wouldn't want to. Bhante, would you be willing to explain the gathas, or what the gathas are about? Gathas is just another word for what you hear and can read in the chanting book. So sometimes they're called paritas, which are protection chants. Sometimes they're called gathas, which means prose or poems. They are the suttas put into verse. So let's take the Ratana Sutta. It comes from the or parita. It's a parita in my chanting book. But if you take the Ratana Sutta or the Mangala Sutta or the Sutta on the Anapanasati Sutta, the Mindfulness of the Breath Sutta, they're taken from the full suttas in the Sutta Pitaka and put into verse. That's all gathas means. So when you hear the word gatha, parita, sutta, generally it's much, and they can be categorized in different chanting books in different ways under different headings. But gatha just means suttas put into verse. And what, if any, experiences you've had with using them? I've heard that they can be an aid to meditative practice. Admittedly, I haven't found that much written on them in English, such as when they are appropriate to use. What is an appropriate type of gatha and so forth. So every morning I chant. The first parts are the devotional chants, just reflections on the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, then a short parita, which is either Ratana Mangala or Karyanamitta Sutta. These suttas, this is a practical example of gathas. These are them. Now I think you might be referring to some traditions or schools of a different nature that may have more longer verses, again still prose, poetic verses of extracts from suttas that are used as repeating long mantras to deeper meditation. We don't do that in this tradition. I don't practice that. Maybe I'd use one word in meditation, bhutto, 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 something like that. But not even that really. But the breath is sufficient enough meditation object to use, I find, to bring one's attention into focus and develop samadhi. So chanting is a warm-up exercise, it could be considered, prior to meditation, as I do in the morning, and then we meditate for a few minutes and then we have some blessings. So this is all there for. It's just a chanting, another word for chanting, or another long one. This is just about where somebody's visited a Thailand temple where flowers were sold outside, plastic flowers, taken into the temple, offered to the Buddha Rupa by way of offering, dana, and then they saw later that these were collected up and then resold outside. I suppose really that's just a way of not having to go into the temple and give money. Then the money, I would hope, is then collected up later and given to the temple, I would imagine. So, I mean, these are practices I don't really find, there's certainly not things I get involved in or see why it's that necessary. This is part of organised religion and the way a lot of temples in Buddhist countries operate. I wouldn't get too involved in thinking about the reasonings behind that. The logical answer is, well, the money's just going to the temple, it's just a one way of getting it there rather than you putting the money in a box. They're not really there to try and con you. It's not a trick, it's blatantly obvious. I've seen it myself. And I must say, when I first saw it as a layperson, I thought, hello, that's a bit off, isn't it? At least they're not hiding it. You know, it's plain that that's their way of collecting money. Sir, can I ask, if you had to give away all your wealth before becoming a monk, we've had this question before, haven't we? Are you able to keep this in an account somewhere so to support yourself if you disrobe? Well, no, there wouldn't be any point keeping anything like that. You renounce money, the use of money, for the purpose of renouncing the use of money, not, oh, well, I'll save it for later, just in case I need it. So there are perhaps, when you're a foreigner in a different country, or there's certain legal requirements of the country you're from, I don't know, maybe you have still some tax issues outstanding or some pension funds or something like that in your country which you don't have access to, but you don't, that's it, have access to them or control over them anyway, so they don't count. What we're talking about is money you have. I mean, I'd reduced my life slowly over a number of years down to the bare minimum anyway, so I wouldn't say I had to give away all my wealth. There wasn't any wealth. I'd already slowly used it to just fund and enable my practice and give away what I could by way of chattels, so things I owned, so that I could live simply with very little. This is what you do. You don't have a hidden agenda. You don't think, right, I'll keep some money behind me there just in case. You are becoming a monk. You're renouncing that side of things. Now, it's not to say that that you might need to perhaps have in place, if you're not well supported in your monastery, or you've moved into a different country from where your original monastery is, you might have to have someone holding funds which are donated by other lay people to use on your behalf should you need medical assistance or visas renewed, any flights for that purpose also, or if someone wanted to invite you somewhere and it was going to cost for you to get there, then they can also make donations that will go to be used by a trustee, a steward we usually call them, who can, you know, use that money that way. But for the way you're describing it, no, that defeats the object. I mean, the point is you're renouncing the use of money. Now I've lost my where I've got to now. That's how to detach. Garters. Yes. Sorry about this. Okay, that's money. Right. Do people who come to make offerings know they are being filmed? Well, yes, this is a very small room. It's not, I'm outside now. And in order to film anything in that room, the cameras for the phone, it's on this little stand thing. You can't miss it. You've got to step over it. And you can see the little light flashing. I don't think I've needed to have the conversation because as you've seen, the English, I don't have any Sinhalese, and English isn't good to have a great big, basically you don't have to sign a release form, but it's not secretly filmed, no. And yeah, they're quite, most people don't, it's never, I don't actually have the camera on unless it happens to be on at the end of the chanting and then someone turns up offering dana. Those are the occasions that have gone on camera, but only very few in the length of time I've been here. And they have been, I've aired those recently because they were there and I thought it would be useful for people to see people offering dana. But on all of those occasions the people were perfectly happy, yes, with that. But people coming here to make offering aren't going to be generally on camera because I won't have had the opportunity to position it and turn it on. Right, when you talk about letting the mind settle and become calm, does that mean when you suddenly stop striving and it feels like you can stay in the meditation session forever? Does that mean when you forever? But in order for that to happen, you need to let go sufficiently. So we can't stay in our meditation session, let's say in samadhi even, forever. We are subject to aging, sickness and death, and more importantly and more immediately you're likely to need to go to the toilet or need to get up and stretch or have something to eat at some stage, so that isn't the intention. We look to meditate regularly and often for as long as we can within our comfort zone. It's not an Olympic event. In order for that to happen, do you need to sufficiently let go? The whole process of meditation is to develop the quality of being able to let go, to reduce the defilements of greed, hatred and delusion. That is letting go of desire for wanting more and more of something, and just being satisfied, content with what we need. So it's a very simple activity, meditation, that can give us a lot of real joy, real relaxation, real peace of mind, calmness and happiness, without having to fund it or replenish it or replace it in any way. It is an always available resource to us when we've practiced it, but it takes practice, it takes development. You have to actually do it to develop the ability to let go of other forms of entertainment, for example, or things you think are satisfying which ultimately are not. So I think, as I usually say, you shouldn't try too hard, just sit and allow the mind to settle and eventually become calm, as with our bodies, just sitting and allowing it to settle so that it can eventually relax. Did Buddha or one of his followers say, we are unhappy when we seek our own happiness, we are happy when we seek the happiness of others? No, I don't think so. The Buddha wanted us to seek our own happiness, and by that example of finding what happiness was, in reference to that, we're looking more at contentment, because happiness is just a symptom of contentment. So, whereas sadness is a symptom of being discontent. So we're looking for contentment, and in order for us to show others how to find that contentment, we need to have it ourselves. So we have to begin with ourselves. So in other words, make ourselves happy and then we can make others happy. Yes. So that's I don't know where that statement comes from the poster on the back of a bus, I should think, but it's not from the suttas. I get the idea. Be kind to others. That is generally what Buddhism is about, but it's not specifically about happiness. If you think and look into the meaning of happiness to understand that, why that's not in the suttas. Okay. Could you recommend some books, texts, websites in English to study, to reflect on the Noble Eightfold Path? I only have access to Tibetan, so I won't go on all the rest of it there, Tibetan, Mahayana. It's very interesting, but I won't read it all out now. So yes, The Word of the Buddha by Bhikkhu Nyanatiloka, as I've said before. The chanting book is a good summary of the suttas, and that is enough. Websites, I don't know anything about websites really, really, as far as the internet's concerned, all I can say is, and I have very limited experience of it as far as Buddhist channels are concerned. I do subscribe to a very few of them, but it isn't necessarily what would be useful to you. You need to find, as you would with teachers in real life, teachers that are talking about Buddhism that you find easy to understand, practical to use, and make sense. But really the essential teachings with regards to the Noble Eightfold Path are the Noble Eightfold Path. You don't need to read a book about it. The point of it is the Four Noble Truths, and the fourth of those is the path leading to the end of suffering, is very simple. A book on it only complicates it. But as far as Buddhism in general, The Word of the Buddha by Nyanatiloka Bhikkhu, a German monk written at the turn of the century, the last century, in this country, he was a German monk but living here in Sri Lanka, is usually the one that I think most Theravada Buddhist monks started with, and it's a good explanation of those Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Other than that, there's libraries full of them, Google Books full of them, infinite numbers, and I don't have any preferences. I prefer not to read books. I've got no books, not one book in this in Kuti anymore. I gave them all away to the local Buddhist society back in my own country. All of my books I gave to them because I thought, well, people like reading books, but that isn't practicing. That's reading books about practicing, and it's better to just practice. Put the books away and do it. Follow the Noble Eightfold Path, which includes sitting down, meditating. The time you spend reading is time you could be spending meditating. Listen to some Dharma talks, 1, 2 even, maybe 3 a day, for 40 minutes or less than an hour. That's sufficient Dharma. Not to get the mind racing and contemplating and thinking and debating. This is why the Noble Eightfold Path is so explicit in what it describes of right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right samadhi. And all of those in detail I talk about here on this channel, more or less each and every time I sit in front of this camera, as I'm doing now. So, please subscribe here, listen to other people's comments and questions, and you will derive a lot of knowledge from that, as well as the useful Pali terminology. But the other book is the chanting book. That really contains reflections that are important to know in Theravada Buddhism. And I am, of course, only speaking of Theravada Buddhism, which is what you're asking me about, because you have a background of something I'm not sure what it is, but there's other things, Mahayana and Tibetan Buddhism, which are a whole lot more complicated and more on the side of theory and debate, which I don't know much about. So, but that's really what you're asking me. I hope that helps. I see some other people have recommended their favourite books, but you must remember, we're all different. You may find a book that's useful that others may not, but beware of reading too much. Oh, I've lost the place again. Oh, that's that one. Right, okay. Okay, do you warm the food you're offered curries, for example, curries. Do you have any kind of fridge for storage? So no, I don't warm any food up. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what it is, or certainly what temperature it is. It's not important. It usually comes, you know, wrapped up and warm, but really by the time I get to eat it, it's cooled down. I don't remember the last time I had hot food. It would have been back in my monastery in India, where they have a kitchen and people keeping the food hot and making it, lay people, and then it's served up within a time frame that you can sit and eat it whilst it's still hot. But I wasn't there so often. Usually I was living outside of the monastery whilst in India, so something I'm not used to. But it's not important, you know, the food is there for us to live another day. So if a curry isn't hot, it doesn't matter, it's not important. Do you have any kind of a fridge? Well, we don't store food overnight. We have to have our food offered to us. It has to be offered, and then we can eat it, but it has to be eaten and finished before midday. That's the rule. So anything that's left over from that, I put on the table here and people collect, and it's shared out through some different other people, local people. But so there's no need for a fridge for storing food. But I do have access to a fridge, because what I can, that doesn't have to be offered, it can be offered once a day, are cold drinks, or even cold water, which is nice when it's very hot. And I have use of a fridge. We don't own anything, you see, so we can't own a fridge. Somebody actually has also offered kindly to donate or donate money in order to someone to go and purchase a fridge. So I appreciate that's very kind, but there is one here already that I'm able to use, but I can't store food in it and wouldn't need to, because we don't store food overnight. And anything that goes in it is only touched by me, because it's in my building. Otherwise, if it was used by others, it would then have to be re-offered. So each day, some maybe drinks are offered at the Pindapart, or when people bring dana, and they can go, bottles of water and things like that can go in the fridge and then finish that day. And if they're not finished and there's some remaining the next day, somebody can just come and re-offer those bottles. That's just the way it works. So thanks for your concern there. It is quite useful. I haven't had a fridge anywhere else I've been. Oh, look, here's the next question. I wish you an offering of a refrigerator. Is that allowed? Well, thank you. As I said, it's not disallowed, but only for the use of keeping some drinks cold. And of course you need electricity, which I do have here, so it's useful. In Thailand we used to have these ice boxes. I think they call them eskies in Australia, but these insulated boxes, and the lay people used to bring bags of ice and fill them up, and they'd put Coca-Colas and things like that in there each and every day. But it has to be re-offered every day, these drinks. And as we spoke yesterday, somebody asking again, can they visit me? Where am I? I think I've given all the information about that in last week, actually, in those questions there. You can just Google Maps, English Buddhist Monk. That's where I am. And that question I've already answered. And so there, that, and I think I'm more or less getting towards the end. How is the body you occupy, and how is your development? So I'm fit and healthy, thank you for asking. I'm well and I'm happy. And as far as our attainments, development along the path, we don't discuss that, but I can happily say I'm happy, and very happily say that I'm feeling healthy enough. So that's good. How can one visit? There's a lot of those. That's because I think I put the video up last week of where I am. Okay, so last question. Why did you beat on him and not sit with him to meditate for a few minutes? It doesn't make sense to me. Sorry. Okay, so this is in reference to the video, I think, with the title, "Do you meditate?" which was my question to, as it is to all people who visit me here, whether they're from Sri Lanka or any country, because it's 1/3 of the Noble Eightfold Path. So I need to know if they absolutely say they don't meditate. It's very important to address why that is. Now, I hope, and I'm pretty sure I didn't, if I don't quite understand the expression beat on him, maybe forcefully said, you should meditate. That's not beating on someone. I'm not physically forcing anyone to meditate. As you're suggesting, rather than not sit with him and make him meditate for a few minutes. Well, firstly, they were very uncomfortable sitting on the floor. I did offer them chairs, but they wanted to sit on the floor because I was sitting on the floor. So they won't sit, people won't generally want to sit on a chair above you, understandably. And clearly had just come to offer dana and didn't want to meditate, and made it quite clear that they don't meditate. So it's very important for me to stress to anybody whom sees no relevance in meditation, the importance of meditation. And if that's considered beating on someone, I will continue beating on each and every one of them and you, because if you're not meditating, you're not practicing Buddhism. Simple as that. We practice sila, moral virtue, and I think everybody, and hopefully, can do that. No killing, stealing, sexual misconduct, lying, or taking of intoxicants. That should not be difficult. We practice meditation. It isn't difficult. We do have time to meditate, and if we don't, we only need to get up a few minutes early to find time to meditate, each and every day. This is all I'm saying. That's not beating on anyone. It is just forcefully suggesting that if you want to practice Buddhism in order to become free from suffering in this lifetime, you'll have to do what the Buddha taught us to do, which is keep those precepts and practice meditation. And only this way do you develop wisdom, panya. You can develop all the knowledge, intellectual wisdom you like, reading books, studying and learning to recite the gathas, the suttas. You can study the Abhidharma. You can gain a PhD, a doctorate in Buddhism, but you will not become enlightened unless you practice meditation. I'm only talking about that and nothing else. And I will always confirm with people, if you like, maybe I don't have a big sign on the door outside saying, please be aware you may be filmed. I think that's what that last comment was referring to there, because that's a very Western thing, that people really don't care about such things here anyway, or anywhere you are being filmed these days. In the Western world, there's nowhere you can go where you're not on camera. I even understand people these days have doorbells with cameras on them, so even if you're walking down the street, you could be on anybody's personal camera, let alone what the necessary government authorities in any location are filming at any point in time, which have immense capabilities and detail in what they're filming. So apart from that, the one warning I would put on the door is do not bother me unless you are interested in meditation, because as much as I'd like to encourage the generosity that is on offer and comes, I want to give something back. And if I can't give someone the simple nudge by pointing them in the right direction of the practice of meditation, then I am not doing them a good service as far as I'm concerned. There are many, many monasteries surrounding me immediately within this vicinity who will gratefully receive any amount of dana all day long, every day, and they do. Most people are coming here because they've heard that I'm different. As I said to those people, nothing special, just different. I practice meditation, that's what's different. So they want to hear about that. And if you listen to the end of the video, they did express that they were very delighted to have heard that different point of view. So on that note, we should leave it there, and until next time, be happy and stay well. Sukhi Hotu.